Welcome back. Bovine respiratory disease, or BRD, is the single most costly health issue facing cattle producers in every segment of the industry. It's a billion-dollar problem, and in the fight against bovine respiratory disease, it's important to look at all the options. Cattlemen and Cattlemen reporter Brian Baxter has more on a major research project that is making real progress in the effort to prevent this costly disease.
I'm involved with a USDA 5-year grant called the BRD CAP, Bovine Respiratory Disease Coordinated Agricultural Project. And the overall objective of that grant is to try to help use genomics to identify regions of the bovine genome associated with BRD susceptibility, with the overall objective being to provide industry with a tool to enable them to select for cattle that are less susceptible to bovine respiratory disease.
What we intend to provide the industries is a tool for selecting and breeding more resistant cattle. And the technology is available now to produce those tools when we've identified and verified the genetic elements that are involved.
Collecting the large number of samples needed to identify genetic markers that might be associated with BRD required a great deal of industry collaboration. Given the challenges BRD causes their operation, Cactus Feeders was happy to help in this research project.
BRD is no doubt a sizable problem. It'd be hard to put a dollar figure on what really all the impacts are. For us here in the feed yard, the easiest thing to measure is the animal that doesn't survive. We can put a dollar figure on that, but it's much further reaching than just the animals that die, both from a labor standpoint, from a cost of production standpoint. Those costs ripple up and down the whole beef chain.
BRD is probably the largest malady that we deal with, condition that we deal with. It has to be diagnosed and treated on the feed yard. Approximately 65% of the mortality rates that we see on the feed yard are due to some type of respiratory condition.
Research is a very big part of our business here at Cactus Feeders. Our leader, our CEO, Mike Engler, is a scientist himself. He's on the board for this CAP grant that funded this respiratory disease project. And certainly, again, both from a cultural standpoint as well as a business operating standpoint, research is a very big part of our business every day.
This is a project that could not be done without the cooperation. It's a project that requires us to look at several thousand cattle. Certainly no academic institutions are prepared to do that. So the academic expertise has to be merged with the industry, who in our case have been extremely cooperative. It's been a really important and a very excellent collaboration.
It's no secret that over the past few years, the use of antibiotics in treating animals has come under increased public and political pressure. Antibiotics are commonly used to both prevent and treat BRD, so it's become even more important to research new ways to prevent diseases such as BRD.
Obviously, when cattle arrive at the feed yard, we want to arrive healthy cattle that are ready to go to work producing beef. If they're not healthy, or if they're striving to overcome respiratory disease, then they're not productive using the resources that we put in, both from a labor standpoint as well as from a feed and water and energy standpoint.
I think that's where we have to move to today. We have to be more concerned about prevention rather than treatment. We try on our arrival processes and in our processing barn to do everything we can to set that animal up for a good experience and a healthy experience in the feed yard.
There's a real push at the moment to decrease our use of antibiotics, and there's an obvious need to try to have prevention rather than treatment be the way to address disease. And I think that there's such an industry benefit from adopting animals that are less susceptible to disease that I think that will be ultimately a market pull to select for animals that are both productive and also more healthy and less susceptible to disease.
As a veterinarian, the use of genetic markers, I think those are necessary steps that we have to take in prevention. The vaccines that we have today are good vaccines. The preventative measures that we can apply to these animals on arrival at the feed yards are good products. But we need to take a step further. And I think that's one thing that the DNA selection genetic markers, I think that provides us.
Always looking to increase efficiencies at their operation, the team at Cactus Feeders understands that research projects such as this are important not only to their operation but to the beef industry as a whole.
BRD is no doubt probably our biggest challenge, as we talked about earlier. So I'd say that any amount of research that's put into that is a pretty big deal.
Research obviously is very important to try to address problems of animal agriculture and agriculture in general, and the technologies that we use to address some of those problems, we have to be able to have access to those and be able to use innovations to address these problems. And I think that it's an important message to get out that we're able to use innovation to really address the problems that exist, and that if we're not able to use those technologies, we're basically increasing the environmental footprint of our agricultural production systems. And I would argue most consumers would not see that as something that they're in support of. I think most of us would agree we want to produce better food, more food with less environmental impact. And so what better way to do it than using research and science to try to address those problems?
You know, there's a lot of talk about sustainability, and you know, we certainly take that seriously, very much part of our initiatives, particularly here at Wrangler Feed Yard, which is the home of our research location, but we're more about progress than sustaining. And this certainly represents a progress in the beef industry in terms of understanding the bovine species.
BRD will continue to be an issue for the beef industry, but with research focused on genetic selection, there's solid progress and the promise of new tools in the fight against this costly disease. Using genetics to select for healthy animals rather than antibiotics to treat sick ones is a promising approach to address the problem of BRD. Reporting from Tulia, Texas, I'm Brian Baxter for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
The BRD CAP project is a collaborative effort between researchers and industry partners. To learn more about the impact this group hopes to have, go to brdcomplex.org for detailed information.